Some religious teachers and priests eat food given to them in faith, but they make their living by practicing wrong sciences and skills. They study ocean science, prediction science, and the science of reading big signs like sneezing. They study dream science, the science of reading marks on the body, and the science of reading cloth that has been cut by animals. They practice the science of reading signs, worship fire gods, and perform rituals with rice, grass, seeds, ears of grain, sesame, oil, face, and blood. They study body science, building science, law science, and the science of calming troubles in houses. They study the science of spirits, the science of snakes, the science of poison, the science of scorpions, the science of mice, the science of birds, and the science of insects. They tell people how long they will live, teach ways to protect weapons, and know the sounds of animals. A monk completely avoids making a living through all these wrong sciences and skills. This is also one of his moral rules. Some religious teachers and priests eat food given to them in faith, but they make their living by practicing wrong sciences. They study the marks on gems, clothes, sticks, swords, and bows. They study the marks on weapons, women, men, boys, and girls. They study the marks on male servants, female servants, elephants, horses, and turtles. They study the marks on goats, buffaloes, cows, rams, chickens, and quails. They also study the marks on iguanas, earrings, and deer. A monk completely avoids making a living through all these wrong sciences. This is also one of his moral rules. Some religious teachers and priests eat food given to them in faith, but they make their living by predicting wars and battles. They predict that on a certain day, the king from outside the city will leave his palace. They predict that on a certain day, the king from outside will enter the city. They predict that on a certain day, the king from outside will come to the king inside the city. They predict that the king from outside will retreat to his palace. They predict that the king from outside will enter the city. They predict that the king inside the city will retreat. They predict that the king inside the city will win. They predict that the king from outside will lose. They predict that the king from outside will win. They predict that the king inside the city will lose. They make their living by predicting in this way, saying, "This king will win," and "This king will lose." A monk completely avoids making a living through all these wrong sciences of predicting wars. This is also one of his moral rules. Some religious teachers and priests eat food given to them in faith, but they make their living by studying the movements of the moon, sun, and stars. They predict when a lunar eclipse will happen. They predict when a solar eclipse will happen. They predict when stars will gather together. They predict when the moon and sun will follow their correct paths. They predict when the moon and sun will not follow their correct paths. They predict when the stars will follow their correct paths. They predict when the stars will not follow their correct paths. They predict when meteors will fall. They predict when lightning will flash. They predict when the earth will shake. They predict when the sky will rumble. They predict when the moon, sun, and stars will rise, set, become bright, and become clear. They say that a lunar eclipse will cause certain results. They say that a solar eclipse will cause certain results. They say that stars gathering together will cause certain results. They say that the moon and sun following their correct paths will cause certain results. They say that the moon and sun not following their correct paths will cause certain results. They say that stars following their correct paths will cause certain results. They say that stars not following their correct paths will cause certain results. They say that meteors falling will cause certain results. They say that lightning flashing will cause certain results. They say that the earth shaking will cause certain results. They say that the sky rumbling will cause certain results. They say that the moon, sun, and stars rising, setting, becoming bright, and becoming clear will cause certain results. A monk completely avoids making a living through all these wrong sciences of studying the sky and stars. This is also one of his moral rules. Some religious teachers and priests eat food given to them in faith, but they make their living by predicting things. They predict that there will be good rain. They predict that there will be no rain. They predict that there will be plenty of food and drink. They predict that there will be no food and drink. They predict that there will be safety. They predict that there will be danger. They predict that there will be sickness. They predict that there will be good health. They also make their living by counting on fingers, doing calculations, dividing numbers, writing poetry, and teaching sciences about things that happen in the world. A monk completely avoids making a living through all these wrong sciences and predictions. This is also one of his moral rules. Some religious teachers and priests eat food given to them in faith, but they make their living by doing low kinds of work. They arrange marriages. They help people get divorced. They talk about making people agree. They talk about making people separate. They give advice about collecting money and spending money. They try to bring good luck and wealth. They do actions to cause bad pregnancies. They do actions to stop or destroy pregnancies. They make charms to make the body strong. They tie strings as charms. They chant mantras to turn a person's hands, to make someone not hear sounds, and for other tricks. They ask questions by putting gods into written leaves. They ask questions by putting gods into women's bodies. They ask questions by putting spirits into servant women's bodies. They worship the sun. They serve and worship big trees. They spit out fire from the mouth. They call on a lucky goddess. A monk completely avoids making a living through all these low and wrong practices. This is also one of his moral rules. Some religious teachers and priests eat food given to them in faith, but they make their living by practicing medicine and healing. They perform peace rituals. They do work to make business succeed. They perform magic rituals. They do rituals for the earth. They change a woman into a man. They change a man into a woman. They build houses on empty land. They choose good places for houses and perform rituals. They wash wounds with water. They cut wounds. They treat burns with fire. They make people vomit. They give people medicine to make them have bowel movements. They give medicine for the upper body. They give medicine for the lower body. They give medicine for the head. They treat ears. They put medicine in eyes. They treat the nose. They pull out teeth. They make cold medicine pastes. They practice surgery using weapons and tools. They set broken bones. They treat children's illnesses. They give root medicines. They give plant medicines and then test their power. A monk completely avoids making a living through all these medical practices and treatments. This is also one of his moral rules. Great King, a monk who follows these moral rules does not feel any fear because of his good behavior. It is like a powerful king who has been crowned and has defeated all his enemies. That king does not fear any enemy from anywhere. In the same way, Great King, a monk who follows these moral rules does not see any reason to be afraid because of his self-control. Because he follows these noble moral rules, he feels a very pure and clean happiness inside his body and mind. Great King, this is how a monk who has these qualities is called a person who follows moral rules.